Hello and welcome to Jim's Tabletop Wargaming. Today we'll be reviewing the Getting Started with Warhammer 40k magazine. This comes with two models and is aimed for those with little to no knowledge of the hobby. This is for sale in the UK for £10 from Games Workshop, but you can pick this up from some retailers for around £8.50. The models included are Primaris Assault Intercessor Space Marine and a Necron Warrior. These two are apparently designed to be built without tools, so the joints on the plastic sprues are slightly thinner than usual. Hopefully they will pop off with little effort. The guide itself is broken down into four main topics, as you can see from the cover, with a brief overview of each towards the beginning of the magazine. Those topics being collecting, building/painting, and playing. It's worth mentioning that the building and painting are rolled into one, as building is only covered by about 2 pages in the book, so it's more like 3 topics in reality. The start of the book has an index page of sorts, so you can just skip ahead to the relevant pages for each topic, and it's closely followed by the instructions for the models themselves. Nothing too interesting here, they're just normal build instructions for the models. So first we're going to take a look at the models included in the kit. So as I said, we've got Space Marine and Necron here to assemble, and the build instructions do make it quite clear which parts go where, and they are obviously listed on the sprues as well, with their little corresponding numbers and so on. The models came off fairly easy. There wasn't really much in terms of difficulty removing the Space Marine, as there weren't as many small parts on the Space Marine that could break, so you were able just to apply force to those just to snap them off. The only bits that might be a little bit flimsy would be things like the purity seals, and also the chainsword itself might be a little bit flimsy, but the rest of the model is fairly robust, very well built, and as usual, highly detailed for a Games Workshop kit. So they are on par with standard the things that you might have expected from other box sets. The Necron was slightly harder to remove, as it was a lot thinner in places, and they're a lot more skeletal in nature than Necrons, so a lot of the joints on them are quite thin. The gun itself was held in place on both sides of the gun in multiple locations, so it was difficult to pry off, but I did manage to get that done. Overall, I would say the quality of these is very high. You can remove them without tools, as it does say on their website that it can be built without tools, though it doesn't really mention that in the book, which is interesting. I would recommend, if you have a pair of hobby snips, to use those, as it will give you a much cleaner finish. There wasn't as much in terms of sort of excess plastic left over from the process of taking them off, so you can just remove them without tools with no problem, and you still have a very high quality, high finish miniature. Would still recommend though using tools if you can, because it will give you much greater quality in the finish. Next we can come to the overview of each topic, outlining some of the basic information for each subject, followed by some background information on the universe for context. These pages are interspersed with various instances of Games Workshop telling you how fulfilling and fun the hobby is, just to really sell the idea of 40k and the good times that you all have. This is where it starts to feel a little bit more like a sales pitch and less like a guide. Going forward, we have the collect section. This mostly covers the races of 40k and things like what a codex is. Each page has some of the fantastic concept art for the relevant race, as well as images of the models themselves, fully painted and in a diorama style setting. Then we move on to an overview of the various war zones, such as Vigilus and Cadia, to establish a little bit more of the 40k setting and races places within it. In the building and painting stage, we see a brief mention of the tools available, assembly options and things like the push fit models as well. Next, the painting stage covers some of the differences between classic and contrast paints from Citadel, followed up with a painting guide for the models included, mentions the painting kits available as well. Next we'll move on to the playing section. Here we get the usual distinction between the styles of play, such as open, narrative and match play, as well as what tools are used. We are then treated to a battle report of Space Marines and Necrons, which covers quite a number of pages. Finally, the magazine ends with what amounts to an advertisement for the Space Marine Necron starter kits, as well as a few units that you can add to those armies as well, just to flesh them out a little bit more. So what did I think? Well, I've deliberately kept my biggest complaint until now as it's present throughout the entire magazine, and that is that it is incredibly brief and lacks much of the in-depth information I would have expected. If I myself had just come into the hobby and this was the first thing that I read, I would undoubtedly have more questions than answers after reading it. The play section does not cover the basic rules used, it really just covers what's going on there, so they just say, a character has beheaded a guy and things like that. They don't really tell you anything about the numbers involved, what the dice rolls mean. They just tell you that they use dice. It's not very fleshed out at all. The painting section does not cover any of the commonly used techniques, it just barely mentions them at all, and then it has a very brief picture of what they're trying to describe. So they have a picture of dry brushing that doesn't really convey accurately what dry brushing is. It's just a fairly dark picture with a model and a paintbrush in it. There's almost no information you can gather from that. Many of the races are just bundled together in the lore descriptions of them, so the Eldar themselves just get a paragraph for each of the different factions. So you just get a paragraph there for Harlequins, Ynnari, Dakari and normal Eldari. So overall it just stands to pique your curiosity further and inspire you with its artwork and model showcase. Outside of that, I would say it's not going to teach you enough about Warhammer 40k for you to really know if you're going to like it, at least just not from reading this. Many of the paragraphs within are padded with reassurances that you can approach the hobby however you want, and you will feel pride and a sense of accomplishment from doing so. While this is fine on its own, it does not need to be reiterated throughout, as it's eating into the very little real estate between the overuse of images. The magazine would be more suited towards a younger audience, I feel, as this is the kind of thing I would expect a kid probably to see in a store and ask their parents to buy for them, buy it on a whim, just to get them into the hobby. And I think that might be the direction they've gone with this. It's also a good way of getting your hands on a couple of models to really see the quality of the miniatures that Games Workshop produce. If you are on the fence about the hobby, as models included are very good examples of what Games Workshop produces. But I wouldn't recommend this as a starting point for the majority of people, as there are much better resources available. Just a quick glance across YouTube will yield a myriad of information on races, in-universe, and ways to start collecting for the budget conscious, as well as painting guides. We have painting guides here on this channel. So there are many different ways in which you could approach getting into 40k with a lot more information, a lot more resources available. I mean, they don't really in this book direct you to too many places. They do direct you to Citadel Colour for their own painting guides, but there's not really much else. It's a case of, it just says, buy these box sets to continue from here. So I wouldn't really necessarily recommend this. Kind of disappointed with it, to be honest. I think it could have been potentially a lot better than it was, and it does just feel like it's almost just marketing material more than anything else. That's my thoughts on this product. Hope you've enjoyed the review. Have a good one.